I'm really happy with the small little tail animation that I created for my character, and I'm ready to incorporate that movement back into the primary timeline. These animation actions are a wonderful tool because they allow us to kind of group things together, to focus our creative energy and our efforts on just a small part, knowing that we could always transfer this data over into another area. I know a lot of professional animators do this with dialogue, faces, and eyes. They have their own action just for the mouth. That way they can focus all of their efforts on just one piece without having to deal with all the complexities of the remainder of the body. Let's jump into our timeline real fast because there's a couple things that we need to do. First and foremost, I made a small little change to emphasize the conclusion of our wave. If you look at the way that these keys are structured, I've gone ahead and kind of spaced them out like this, so that tail 2 finishes first, and then tail 3, and then 4, and then so on and so forth. This further accentuates the wave by staggering the keyframes in a kind of a diagonal line. All of those control locators are stopping in their own moment in time versus everything stopping at the exact same time. I'm really happy with this structure, so there's a couple things that I want to do. First and foremost, I want to make sure I select all of my keyframes because all of this jazz is going to be transferred over into the final animation action that we created before. Copying and pasting keyframes between actions is really encouraged and super easy. Let's do it. With all the keys selected, we'll right click and we're simply just going to do a copy. Let's jump over into our action editor and transition from the tail movement action into our final animation action. Cool, huh? All that stuff is back. It's still there, the squash and stretch and all that jazz. Now we need to figure out where we want to have this action go, or this tail whip action happen. I think I want to have it at the beginning. It's important that we already have keys on the control locators that we're pasting into. Luckily for us, I did that at the beginning. If you don't have keys for tail 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 at this stage, just make one real fast. We need to have something to paste into, okay? I have my playhead where I want this action to go. So I'm simply just going to do right click and then paste. Now it looks like I didn't have, oops, let's select all of those channels. Excuse me, I only had tail 3 selected. So if we select tail 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, now we can right click and hit paste, and all of that keyframe data is going to be transferred from the tail whip action to the final animation action, which is pretty great. If we were to zoom out a little bit here, yeah, there it is. Boom. And then we take off. Now, we're always looking for opportunities to do some overlapping action. I'm really quite pleased with the animation at the beginning, but it definitely looks like two different pieces at the moment. As we scrub through, we get the tail whip, which is great, and then squash and stretch, and then we go. We jump up. I want to mesh these together. I want to overlap all of these actions. We're always moving our body at multiple directions and at multiple appendages at multiple times. We want to try to replicate that as much as we can. Overlapping action and follow through allows us to create the blending of multiple appendages and body parts moving at the exact same time. We have a couple different strategies that we can employ to do this. I'm going to go with the easy one, and I'm going to grab all of these keyframes in here, which represent the body, okay? So if you think about it, all of this is the squash and stretch and the bounce. Let's also, before we go any further, let's go back to our bone collection, turn on the squash and stretch bone collection so we get their keyframes. Here's a great power user trick. I got a pretty long list of control surfaces that I'm animating in my dope sheet. It definitely requires me to scroll down. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to use the summary row. If I grab all of these keys up in here on that red line, it's going to select all the keyframes that are downstairs. And I just recognized something that I want to change on my tail. Before I make any changes, these keys in here represent the original pose of the tail. I don't want that because I've already posed it separately in my other action. Let's delete that real fast. There we go. Now it's looking exactly the way I described it. And starting at frame 36, I'm going to grab all of those keys. And now I'm going to move it to the left. This is going to create that wonderful sense of overlapping action. I'm going to put my playhead, yeah, maybe right around, I'm trying to figure out where I want the squash and stretch to start. Maybe right there. So with all of those keys still selected, I want to move it like that. Let's play it. Now I got a bunch of cleanup in here that I still need to do, like a bunch of cleanup. But at the very least, we're starting to establish a good structure for our animation, one that we can clean up quite easily, and one that we can continue to edit in the graph editor. However, the middle section here is a little bit problematic. We still need to go in and animate how that tail is going to be going up and down. Well, the movement of the tail going as the ball jumps up and down is not going to be too dissimilar from that little tail whip. So why don't we just recycle all of those keys? Let's just jump back into the tail movement action. I got everything selected. I'm going to copy those once again. We'll go back into final animation, and now let's just figure out where we want it to begin. Probably right about in here. We want the tail to start changing its shape. So let's paste it in. I'm going to select all of my control surfaces to paste into. And now we can right click and paste. Yeah, it's cool. I like it, but if you look at the animation, it does an entire tail whip before it lands. So we're going to change this ever so slightly. And I think this might be a good, fun way of introducing or reintroducing this idea that we can scale our keyframes. I'm going to scale my key. I'm going to put my playhead where the animation is beginning, and I'm going to hold down I'm going to tap the S key and drag to the right to scale these keyframes apart from each other. Yeah, there's some good things in there, but there are some bad things in there as well. As we get to the apex, right there, yeah, I think we may want to mess around with these keys to create a better transition point for our tail. Generally speaking, the last half is pretty good, but I need to massage that middle part a little bit more. Shoot, we can even do the exact same thing at the end. As it comes down, maybe after it does the squash and stretch, it does another tail whip movement. What would happen if I pasted it in here? Let's play the animation. Of course, there's a lot of things that still need to be refined, but we're creating structure. Jumps. Boof. There it is. That's something that I can build on. That's something I can work on. I have the keyframes in there. Now it's all graph editor work and some timing efforts to make sure that I'm getting the illusion that I'm after. Having separate actions allows us to create kind of little groups of keyframes that we can pull from and insert into the scene. It allows us to focus. Bringing all these keyframes together at the end is always going to be the goal. We still need to have one timeline where we can continue to blend and massage and edit these keys together. It's all graph editor and dope sheet work going forward. I don't need to worry too much about the posing. I think I'm pretty much there for the most part. I got some tweaks in there that I got to make, but generally speaking, this is a good starting point. We're kind of at the 3/4 line. The last little bit is just all cleanup and polish work that's going to be done in the graph editor and the dope sheet.